Welcome, Evelyn. Really glad to see you as well. So, I think with that, we're ready to go. And oh, cool. So we got someone else jumping in now. Welcome, Danny. Today, I think is particularly juicy. Am I getting held up by my? Did that stop just for a moment there, or is it still flowing? It's okay. All right, cool. So
it did stop, but it's flowing now.
Okay, thank you. And I'm on my 2G. So if you're watching on Facebook, sorry for this, but here we go. I'm just swapping. There we go. I think that'll be better from there. Welcome, James. Cool. So we've got a little crew coming together. Danny, James, Tom, if you feel to be seen, I'd love to see your faces. If not, that's all to the good as well. I'm excited for today because today I think is juicy stuff. You know that those of us who work inside of the space of coaching, therapy, facilitation, etc., it's all about questions. It's all about provoking through questions. However, I like to say that the skills of coaching are also the skills of life. And I'd say that there's no greater ability that we can develop than asking ourselves good questions. Some of you might have heard me share this before, but I've heard that Albert Einstein once said that if he had an hour to solve a problem that could save the entire world, he'd spend 55 minutes defining the question. Because once you know the question that you want to ask, then it opens the door into the space that you'd like to go into. Now, for many of us, we look at our relationships and go, okay, this is the status quo of that relationship, and maybe that's just the way it's always going to be. In fact, I was talking with, it was my wife, she was talking to a family member earlier today, and she said about somebody else that that's the way it has been, is, and is going to be. And that's very often the way that we can see long-standing relationships, that our past defines our present and will define the future. But questions are the thing that can so often shift us from the course that we're going onto into a completely new direction. I mean, we see it there in the word, yeah? So it says quest, ion. A quest is something that we choose to do that has significance or meaning. Ion is energy. And so the energy of a question is something that opens up a pathway, opens up a quest, opens up something that we can go deeper into. And yet, welcome, Justin. And yet very often we can get satisfied or we can get complacent in terms of the questions that we ask. Welcome, Danny. Good to see you. So for many of us, we can find ourselves asking the same old habitual questions because it's, in a certain sense, the safe zone, but it's also the zone potentially of lesser satisfaction than what we'd want to experience in our relationships. So let's dive straight into this. Some of you guys have already heard this thing before as well, which is the Facebook question. Everybody knows what the Facebook question is in English, yeah? What's on your mind? Back 10, 12 years ago, it was, what are you doing now? I think that we can intuitively see that if we ask people what they're doing now, we're limiting the bandwidth of responses that they can have to being actions that they're up to. When we ask what's on your mind, we're getting into a psychological territory. What we're looking for in a certain sense is questions that actually unearth things that we want to know about. So a good friend of mine, Pablo, recently in his reach outs has been simply saying to people, how are you feeling now? Who's interested in the feelings of the people you care for? And how often can we find ourselves kind of rambling around the content of our lives, talking about, oh, and then I've done this, and then I've done that, and I think soon I'm going to, etc. And yet what we really care about is what's taking place inside. What's taking place inside here? What's taking place inside here? So questions such as, what are you feeling right now? It's very personal. It's very intimate. It very much cuts to the chase of what's really going on, the thing that the person cares about most, which is how they're feeling. Yeah? We could have all the circumstances looking right, but if we're not feeling good, then that doesn't mean anything. Likewise, We could have nothing going right, but if we're feeling good, that's the most significant thing. You know, life is a felt experience. So we're looking for these kind of golden nugget questions. We're also looking for key principles of inquiry. It's good for us to pay attention as well to potential pitfalls, things that can shut things down. So we want to be very aware of context. But all that being said, let's start going forward a bit further. So I'll just share this one other example. I know a couple of you have heard this before, but you know, those of us who live over here, when we're asking them, I think I said it the other day, Evelyn and Justin, when we were in that last one, if we ask people where they've been in their travels, we soon get pretty bored. But if we ask them what led them to going traveling, what they are searching for, what they've learned, now we're starting to get the invisible terrain of meaning coming out. And I suppose what I'm putting forward, is that we might often actually find ourselves talking to people on the horizontal axis of stuff, what's going on, rather than talking with them on the vertical axis of who is experiencing it. And that is the deeper terrain that we often want to get to in our relationships. So, has anyone ever seen that nurse article about the 8 common regrets that people have on their deathbed? Yeah, it's done the rounds. Yeah. And one of the things that she talks about inside of that is people are feeling they haven't shared themselves. They wish that they'd shared more about what they'd experienced in life, more of what was going on for them, really. Yet, what if we haven't been asking? I had these experiences going back about, started about 15 years ago, and then I took it to another level about 12 years ago, 10 years ago, where I realized I didn't know my grandmas all too well. I still had 3 living grandmas. I got 4 parents. So I had 3 living grandmas. And I realized I didn't really know about their childhood. I didn't know about how they had met the significant people in their lives. I didn't know about the crucibles or the challenges that they had gone through. And when I realized that I knew them only through their relationship to me, but not through their relationship to themselves, I went, wow, this is kind of fun. I got 70 years, 80 years of history that I can dig into with this person now and find out about real stuff. And I started asking questions. And of course, because these were the same people who knew my parents, I learned some interesting things about my parents, and I learned some interesting things about me. And family lineage started to make a little more sense for me as I was getting the news directly from the people themselves. Yeah. Now, I bring this up as well to say that it was a great gift for them. One of my grandmas in particular, she said like, oh, Cairo, you're really taking me back now. Oh, geez, when I was that young, I don't know if I can remember. And then she would, because she hadn't opened up that box for a long time. So it took her a little while sometimes to find the key. But then it was like she was actually having parts of herself come back to life. And now the very person who had taken care of me when I was a little person along the way was, in a certain sense, having things come full circle as I was doing my best to take care of her and learn about her and take care of our relationship. So this is a key thing for us, is that very often the key people in our lives, we don't know their context. Anyone got any complaints about their parents from over time? I definitely had my fair share of complaints about what I did and didn't receive from them. However, my complaints have until I went deeper into various of this terrain, and I can't say I understand completely, of course, I wasn't there. But for a long time, my complaints were held in the vacuum of my own psyche. I didn't understand what were the formative things. I had a lot of assumptions, as most of us do. We have a lot of assumptions, this or that from culture, or, very often there's this things where we would just say, that's just the way that person is. But when we start to find out more, we start to invite in a deeper level of understanding. And as Brené Brown said, when you find out someone's story, there is no person's story that won't break your heart. And so we can move from a place of thinking we know certain things to actually having a level of compassion for the key people in our lives that can totally transform the way that we look at them. And it can take off the weird glasses of the roles that we're living in. I am the role of child and I see you through this set of glasses, to you are this person, I am a person. Let us just connect person to person here with deeper levels of understanding, compassion, and so on, which was great for me. And reactivity was great for me, and just being present. It was great for my friendship with my parents, going through processes of curiosity. So tell me what it was like for you when you were younger. What was your relationship like with your mum? What was your relationship like with your dad? Yeah. So the first seed, I suppose, that I'm wanting to plant is, let's get curious. Let's get curious about the people we think we know and find out if we really know them, and ask ourselves what we want to ask these people. What would we like to find out? Yeah. So one way to be able to unearth some of these questions is to ask yourself, what would you like to be asked about? Imagine there was someone that you trusted a lot, you cared about, and you knew they cared about you, and you want them to know you. What would you like them to ask you? Now I'm moving beyond a rhetorical question. I'm actually going to put that forward to the group and say, hey, let's enter into a dialogue for a minute here. What would you like to be asked about, people? I know some things I really have treasured being asked about over time. So I'll pop them forward, unless I can break this monologue into a dialogue. Welcome, Vanessa. So it looks like I'm going to be sticking. Oh, Megan! Yes!
I'll jump in. I'd like to be asked about what I'm passionate about. Like, what do I enjoy doing, and what's my, what's my, my passions, what gets me out of bed in the morning, what brings me to life and makes me smile.
And
That's what I want to talk about.
Yeah, what is it about being asked about things you're passionate about?
It makes, and even just saying that just brings a smile to my face. Like, just thinking of being in that place and doing those things I love. Yeah, it just makes me want to talk about it, and makes me light up and puts my focus into a positive area.
Yes. So that's a super caring act from somebody if they ask us, what are you passionate about? What do you most love doing? Because we know that energy follows thought to a great degree. So when we think about something that brings us good energy, the energy comes like that. Like you were just saying, even as I'm asking this question right now, already I'm feeling good. Yeah. What else? What else might we want to be asked about? I'll put forth a couple of ideas, unless we've got other people to pop things in. I like to be asked about what have been some of the key stages in my life, what have been turning points in my life, who have been the most significant people for me. Yeah. I like to be asked about what I've learned over time. We're going to come to a variety of different things on this front. Here's some of the big questions that people have been grappling with since age old. And so I'm just popping these out as some of the generic major philosophical questions that people have grappled with over time. And I think that there is something to be said for asking these of the people we care for, because in a sense, what we're saying to them is, I honor your voice. I honor your perspective. Can you please share with me the way that you see this thing that humans have been grappling with? Yeah. So, for example, we could ask somebody, who are you? That's a big question. I know that I've known you for all my life, but if I was somebody who was a stranger and I came up to you and said, can you tell me about yourself? What would you tell them? Who are you? That's an interesting question. Yeah. Here's another profound question. What do you see as your purpose? Or what gives you a sense of purpose? What a beautiful gift to bring to somebody, for them to explore. This is what it's about for me. Yeah. All right. Here's a weird one, and I know that this one's potentially a turn off for some people. For people like me, I like it though. And that is, what are your thoughts in relation to free will and determinism? That opens up a philosophical conundrum right there. Yeah, boom, suddenly the mind goes, oh shit, were you always going to ask me that question? Or do I have free will in my response to it? That brings up the heat, you know. What do you believe happens when we die? That's a significant question that brings forth mortality, something that faces us all. It's a very intimate conversation, the conversation about death. Yeah. What is most important to you in life? These are just a handful of things that can dive us into a significant territory. Yeah. So before I talked about the etymology of question, you can see it's got quest, ion, the energy of a quest to it. What else is powerful about questions? They create a context for our relationship. Yeah. They focus our attention. Consciousness is a limitless field of possibility, and then questions come and frame it and say, what do you think about placing our attention here? Questions can express care. You know, you've heard me say this, a couple of you recently, but the root of curiosity and care is the same. So we show our curiosity through the questions that we ask. Now, when we ask questions, of course, if you ask questions because you think that's the dance that we should do in order to appear as if we're interested, that's not going to work well, obviously. Asking questions asks us to also be authentically curious. And that does start with tenderizing our hearts. That does start with investing ourselves in who are these people here. You know, I'm looking out at each of you right now. I go, oh, okay, Justin, we know each other a little bit. I've been loving that we've been spending some time together in this context. But I'm like, who is this man? I had the great pleasure of doing that meditation with you. I think it was last week when we were breathing the other person's breath. And for that period of time, I found myself being immersed in your energy. And as I was immersed in your energy, it took me into a deeper place of intimacy and curiosity. And I suppose I'm using that example to say, if we sit with a picture of, with a thought of the key person that you're focusing on, and ask that person or allow that person to touch us, our curiosity will go up. So before we really focus in on who do I want to ask about what, let us also, once we've identified who, allow that person in a sense to touch our hearts, to touch our minds. Yeah. Because then we can bring that authentic curiosity to them. Now, there is something else to be said inside of this, which is that when we go to somebody with curiosity, it's important that we create context. For example, it might be strange if you've never asked some people in your life some of the key questions you'd like to ask them. You just sit down for dinner and they're expecting that you're going, I'm just going to go super stereotypical here, with a European family, that and the father assumes the son's going to sit down and talk about how much they're missing football. And instead they ask their dad something to do with, what was your relationship like with your dad, out of the blue? And so that's to say that it can be very helpful for us to meta-communicate or to create a context. That can be done very simply. I'm just, I might be speaking the obvious, but it might be words to the effect of, hey dad, I've been thinking about who you are to me and realized I really don't know that much about who your dad was to you. And it got me curious about you and your childhood. And I was wondering if it would be okay if I could ask some questions so I could understand a bit more about what your life has been like. That's seeking permission, creating context, and even in what was maybe 15 to 25 seconds, we've already started to direct someone's focus towards something that if they say yes, we know we can go there. feeling like there's an agreement in place. Yeah. So just sowing the seed that we might want to get all curious. Before we get curious, let's make sure that we create some context. Let's get some permission. And with that, then we can go deeper, then we can go further. So meta communication can do that. Yeah. I'd like to talk to you about the da, 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 which is my segue to say about what? What would we like to talk to them about? Yeah. You know, I like to boil things down to this big three, that there's an intrapersonal domain, someone's relationship to themselves. There's an interpersonal domain, someone's relationships. And there's a transpersonal domain, someone's relationship to something larger and their sense of purpose. And so we can be curious about all three of those domains. Tell me about what it's like to be you. What have you been feeling? What's your relationship like to your mind, etc.? What have you been thinking about lately? We can be curious about how things are going with you and whoever that other person is on the interpersonal level. We can be curious about someone's relationship to something larger, sense of purpose, and so on. Now, let's play this out a little bit though. Let's bring this down from the conceptual and see if you guys can generate. And what I mean by that is we're going to invite in a few people to your mind and then focus in and see what questions you may like to ask them. And then we'll go a bit deeper after that. So for now, James, how quick are you? I love it. So you're getting yourself prepped, which is great. So for right now, I do invite you to allow 1, 2, 3 people to come to mind. You don't need to analyze who they are, but have a sense if yes, this is somebody that I would like to understand more deeply. And as soon as you're ready, we won't spend any longer than that there. You can come to a page, or if you've already got it right there, fine. Otherwise, come to a page and just write their names down, because in the act of writing someone's name down, you will solidify it. You make it that much more tangible. It's almost like you've got a secret now. That has become that much more tangible. I wrote your name down today. Yeah. So what would you like to ask them about? And I'm going to give us a few different categories and see if any questions emerge. So we're going to be working your brain for a couple of minutes here. And please do what you can to bring your attention and focus in on this. So what would you like to ask them about their current situation? Welcome, Julie. What would you like to ask them about their current situation? And if you already have, there's nothing there, all good. How are you feeling right now? That's always a good one. What's on your mind? What have you been thinking about? How much food do you still have in your larder? That was a question with my brother recently. That was an interesting one. And brought forth, yeah, you know, as you know, Megan, you're in Sydney. Sydney supermarkets have been strange. Yeah. What would you like to ask them about their life story, about their history? What would you like to ask this person? So Julie, people have identified somebody that they would like to focus on, and we're just exploring what questions we could ask this person right now.
Exploring a person in what aspect? I'm sorry.
Well, so right now, I've asked people to contemplate, what would you like to ask this person about their life story? You might want to ask them something about their childhood, things about key relationships over time, turning points. What was the toughest time that you ever went through? What have been your greatest successes in life, for example?
Greatest successes coming into my own sense of my heart.
I'm sorry, I'm being rhetorical right now, Julie, although that's a great response. And I'd love to go deeper with you on that. But I was being rhetorical in terms of inviting us to each think on what are these questions we'd like to ask this key person. My apologies if I was unclear there. What would you like to ask them for their opinion on? What would you like to ask them for their views on? I love, I don't know about you guys, but I love it when somebody asks me, what do you think about? Because what they're really saying to me in that moment is that they're curious about what I think because they respect me. They appreciate my perspective. So in a sense, we can honor somebody by simply saying, what do you think about? What do you think are the most important ingredients in a good, healthy relationship? Great questions, things like that. So literally, we can turn our own mind's curiosity about life out and direct that to the people we care for and go to them as our guru, our teacher. And the moment we frame somebody as our teacher in that regard, it's amazing what wisdom can come out of somebody. Yeah. What might you want, and this is in the same vein, but what might you want to ask them for advice about? What would you do in relation to the final one I'm going to put forward is just what would you like to ask them that would help you to better love them? It's a strange way of saying it. But what would you like to ask them that would help you to better love them? For example, these are the questions like what would you like me to do towards you that would in some way contribute to you? Or what would you like me to do more of or less of or start doing or stop doing? I've touched on these questions recently, and I think they're some of the bravest actions we can ever take. I want to acknowledge James in this regard. James has brought these kinds of questions directly to his own children to incredible effect, because now he's finding out what they actually want. And yeah, so beautiful. So I've already touched on this, but some key principles, and we're going to go into some pitfalls as well. CCP folks, you'll recognize some of this content, but key principles. Permission, we already touched on this. I was wondering if I can ask you about is so much better than just asking about. Often. Just because it's giving them already a tacit permission to say, no, actually, you can't, or no, I'm not ready for that, or no, I don't want to go there, whatever the case may be. I'm wondering if you'd be willing to talk about. Now, let's talk about another key principle. When you're starting off a dialogue with somebody, everybody, I imagine, is already cognizant or already aware of the distinction between open and closed questions. Yeah? When we, so you can hear at the start there, I was actually asking more or less a closed question for permission, yes or no. But if we've got permission, from that point, we'll be well served to ask open questions. Open questions allow somebody to define where they go to a significant degree. It could be that we're asking about a specific event, and that could be seen as like restricting where somebody would go in terms of their answer. But, what I am talking about, and I'm going to a pitfall now, is it's very important that we don't start off with a closed leading question such as, don't you think that you treated my mum badly when we were growing up? That is not a question, it's a statement that leads somebody in a particular direction, and it's closed towards a binary of a yes or a no. Whereas when we hear a question such as, how are you feeling right now? Or what's on your mind? We have no idea where the person is going to take us. The key inside of this is to allow the person who's responding to be able to think independently, to invite them into a reflective relationship to whatever it is that we are wanting to ask. So you've already, I'm imagining with some of the questions that you came up with, you already will have come up with some open questions, I'm pretty sure. In fact, if I was to rewind, I'd like to actually come back to that. Who'd be willing to share a few of the questions? You don't need to share with us who you're thinking about. However, I'd love to hear from the group some of the questions, and we'll see how these fit into this principle of asking open questions that can open up a conversation. So yeah, put up your hand if you're willing to share, and let's get a little bit of a brainstorming here. James, what did you come up with?
What do you think needs to be said that hasn't been said?
Oh, welcome to the Dragon's Lair. What is it? What is it that turns you on about that question?
It invites risk. It's almost like a dare. It gives somebody permission, if you've already sort of set up the permission to dig really, really deep. The question's open-ended, and they could be thinking about you.
Yes. Yes, and we could even be as precise as that. Is there anything that hasn't been said that you would like to say to me specifically?
Yeah.
That's powerful, James. Thanks for rocking us right into the vulnerable zone.
Mm-hmm. Pleasure.
You got another that you'd like to give, or someone else?
Just hypotheticals. The question that I would like to ask somebody at the moment is, if you were able to live until 90 years old, and you could either have all your mental faculties or the physical faculties of a 30-year-old, what would you choose and why?
I like this a lot. What is it that turns you on about this question?
Well, it's the form of question. It's the if you could line of question, the hypothetical. It just opens up all sorts of possibilities. You can if you ask a question starting with that, then provided you've got a number of different scenarios that will either sit comfortably or uncomfortably with you with the person you're questioning, then you can just go deeper. You can go deeper with it every stage.
And each one of these, whatever it is we put into that hypothetical, we are meta-communicating or sub-communicating, if you will. I value your thoughts. I value your perspective. Yeah?
Yeah.
Which I really like. I like the creative element as well that comes up there. So that's very open. Again, there's a context, but the person's response to that context is entirely up to them. Anybody else got any questions? Looking down at their questions right now, they're like, oh yeah, that one there. That one there would be important for me. I love it when people bring these into the space to share with one another, because it's quite likely that you're asking something that somebody else will go, ah, I like that. Like James's two thus far. Yeah, thank you, Megan.
One I thought of was, what's keeping you awake these days? which could be taken either of two ways. So it could be, literally keeping you awake, or which I have trouble sleeping because my mind's worrying. So I think that for me that's an interesting one, because I struggle with it, just thinking a million different things that I can't do much about at that precise moment while I'm going to sleep. So I'm genuinely curious about that with people, like what's on your mind, but yeah, what's keeping you awake these days?
It has another level of depth and provocation to it, potentially, of what's keeping you awake. It's one thing to ask what's on your mind. It's another to ask what's on your mind so much that it could be keeping you awake at this time. So, and again, completely open, but also digging into an area of what would be likely really important for the person. Yeah. In this same vein, I know I've said it a couple of times, but what have you been thinking most about lately? you want to know how someone's going right now, finding out where they've been placing their attention, either by choice or by reflex, is an interesting way of doing so. Anything else, guys? So with that, I'll move forward. Oh, yes, please, James, give us one more.
Yeah, as you know from, I think it was last week, I've got really into Box of Crayons, so yeah. Michael Bungay Stanier, and his 7 questions. You know, so what's the biggest challenge here? Staying curious with a line of inquiry as well.
We're actually
and what else?
Yeah, we're going to come back to Box of Crayons actually towards the end of this sequence today, because
lovely. Okay, great. I'll enjoy that.
Yeah, I think I think they're just beautifully sequenced, and not just for coaching. You know, those of us who work in the coaching domain, we know that when we're not to go about trying to intentionally coach people towards outcomes without some kind of permission. And at the same time as that, many of the tools inside of coaching can just be the same things of good life skills. You know, a vein of curiosity, which doesn't necessarily mean, okay, I'm going to get you to an action, get you to a commitment and hold you to it, but rather forwards a line of inquiry so that somebody can get increasingly curious about themselves and see new pathways for themselves. And if we can do that in a way which is very natural, and then I think that it's entirely kosher for us to do so. In certain instances, it might be necessary for us to share with people. That's what we're doing. We can come back to that. So whilst open questions are great for being able to get a context alive, to be able to, in a sense, dive into the other person's reality and have them start to surface the real content that we're going to go into in whatever conversation. Closed questions are really good for us to, one, we talked about before, getting permission, but also for us to make sure that we've understood. So when you combine closed questions with paraphrasing, this is really helpful. I don't know how many times in my life I've assumed I've understood, only to be so far off course from the meaning the person was trying to convey, and then going, whoops, if I had just asked you, what do you mean by blah? Or if I had just paraphrased and said, so when you said that, what I took was that it was really difficult for you when your father left, and that you felt like your mum really struggled on the other side of that. Now, for me to be able to ask that question and then go, is that right? And the other person goes, yeah, that's it. Then go, yeah, right. Okay, tell me more, whatever it is, that we go from there. But if we can do that in a certain sense, we can get mini chapters of meaning solidified and do our best to make sure that actually communication is taking place. And we know that the meaning of communication etymologically is to make common. And if we don't test whether or not the meaning that we've interpreted is the meaning that was intended, then we haven't necessarily assured that a communication has taken place. Yeah, this can be an infinitely recursive thing. I know that we can paraphrase someone's paraphrasing. When I heard you say that you heard me say I heard that you meant this, etc. But it doesn't tend to be that way. That's the beauty of it. Is generally people go, yeah, you got me, or no, that's not what I meant. This is what I meant. But paraphrasing and asking closed questions, is that right? Or have I got the idea? Whatever the case may be, is a helpful way for us to make sure we've got a block of meaning and now we're moving forward together. Expanding what they call in crucial conversations. Our goal in communication is to expand the pool of shared meaning. Yeah, that is the goal of why we are opening our mouths and opening our ears, is to create a pool of shared meaning and to expand it. Yeah. So other pitfalls. This is a strange one, and it's counterintuitive because it's such a beautiful question, but it's using why. Why did you make that choice? Why is very tricky because the mind is trying to interpret something like 4 billion bits of data a second, and then it pops up with a choice or a thought. And how that actually took place when you're talking about a cascading network of neurons is really difficult for people to be able to explain. However, if we ask questions such as what led to, what were the most important considerations, or what was going on, what's. People can identify the what's, and then that starts to give clarity to a why. But when we start with why, often, and this is not always the case, and I really do like the question why, so I'm not naysaying it, I'm just saying be aware that why can lead to a central nervous system response of, I don't know why exactly, but if I ask them instead what was going on, what were the factors, etc., that was easier for somebody to be able to go, oh, well, there was this and there was that. Yeah. Now, I already touched on leading and rhetorical questions earlier, that when we actually are trying to express our own opinion, for example, don't you think that people should give me more examples when I ask them to contribute to the shared space? That's not a question. That's my opinion. It's my desire masquerading as a question. And please don't take my opinion as what is so. You guys are absolutely right to be here as you are. Arguing with the universe is a silly thing to do. But coming back to the rhetorical side of things, if we ask masquerading questions, then that can feel like being pushed in a particular direction. Yeah, James.
Yeah, Clara, what insecurities come up for you when people don't give you the examples you're expecting?
Oh, not much anymore. I just go, oh, there's another moment to breathe and live. You know, the stories that could come up are, oh, are they not engaged? Or have I not created enough trust and rapport inside of the group? Or what can I do to build more relatedness, etc., inside of the group? So there's queries that do arise. But one of my core goals in life is to be friends with silence. As much as I speak a lot, and I've got the moniker Motor Mouth, but at the same time as that, I really do enjoy silence. So it's all good for me on that front.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think it's good for us to all face our collective silence together as well at times. Yeah. So leading and rhetorical questions is another, it can take us down in terms of our connection. Something else is compound questions. For example, I'm going to stick with this thing of like talking to a father about their life experience. Can you tell me what it was like for you meeting my mum? And can you also tell me about your relationship with your mum growing up? It's so divergent. It's so divergent to ask two questions at the same time. The point is that if you find yourself loading two or more questions into a question, you can do something. The way Kaylin describes this is just to ask people for a do-over. It's just say, sorry, can I have a do-over? I'm going to ask that question again. I realized I asked two. I'm going to ask one. Because what happens for the mind is it's kind of, imagine that if you've ever skied, we ski with parallel skis. But if you have divergent skis, especially if they're not in the snowplow direction, they're going out in the duck direction, you're going to get yourself real need for some major yoga chops very quickly. And before too long, the brain's going out in a direction it can't handle. It's going in two directions. So watch out for compound questions, which is basically asking more than one question at a time. One other pet peeve, pitfall that I like to talk about, and it doesn't happen necessarily all that often, but asking what I call passive questions or victim questions, such as, what did that person do to you? Or, oh, that must have been so hard. That's fair to start with, but you must have been so down at that time, or something like that. It's got a leading component along with a passive victim of life component, which is there, compared to what did you do within that dynamic? How was that dynamic up to that point? What else, if we were going further in the conversation, what did you learn from that dynamic, etc.? What else could you have brought from it, or brought to it? Now we're putting the person in the position of perhaps being more responsible, more reflective, and not pushing somebody towards a victim mentality. So that's something for me, because I always wish for people to be relating to life from what I'd call their creative power. And so we can look at how we're framing our questions in such a way that either supports people in relation to that or reduces it. So James brought up something before, and here's a sequence of questions, and it's actually a coaching sequence, but it works really well in life. I do want to say that there is some potential ambiguity around, oh, welcome Dalit, really good to see you. There's some potential ambiguity around how we can best navigate this when we are using things like this at first. For example, when you're first, who here's practiced NVC at any level whatsoever? Okay, great. So we've got a good number of us who have given it a go. Who was found when they first practiced it, it was a bit awkward?
Oh, yeah.
And your mind is like watching you do it at the same time as you're trying to do it. And it's a little like having verbal constipation. You know, that there's something to come out, but you can't quite get it out there with the same level of proficiency as what you normally would. Now, it can be helpful at such times with the people that we are going to be practicing that with, to let them know what we're doing, so that they can watch us as we're straining to get those words out and have a certain understanding about why it's not flowing in the same way, or why we're not occurring or showing up in the way that they're accustomed to. Yeah? Who is this alien imposter who's come and jumped into your body and is now making you say things in a weird way? We can go, well, that alien imposter is myself. I'm actually giving such and such thing a go. So I bring that up to say that when you are focusing on asking new questions with people in your life, you can let them know exactly that I've been questioning the questions that I'm asking, and I've been thinking about different ways that I could get curious to be able to support you with my listening, to be able to support you with my curiosity, to find out more, to have richer shared meaning and purpose in our relationship, and so on. And so, you know, I'm wondering if it's okay with you if I try out some questions that I think can be really helpful, but, you know, it might not feel as natural as I normally am, because in a sense I'm playing with a skill that I feel a little unskilled in relation to, or it's like a new toy. I'm still learning my way here. So this, you can hear that consistently I try and give you guys some kind of meta communication examples, because it's the absence of meta communication creating a context that very often leads to people being busy in their head about the experience rather than being in the experience with us. Whereas when we take that 15 to 30 seconds, maybe a minute, to create a context, human mind likes certainty. Human mind likes to have a sense of, I get what's going on here. And if you know that there's some, you know, I talked to some of you here about hot communication. When we've got transparency around agenda, then it leads people to, it means that people don't need to guess. All of that said, this here comes from, it's a slight adaptation from something that is done by a group called Box of Crayons. And I always forget how to say his name. So can you unmute yourself, James? Michael Bungay.
Bungay Stanier.
Stanier. Michael
That's
Bungay.
That's what he called himself on the recent TED talk anyway. So
okay,
that's
thank
his
you.
pronunciation.
Okay, good. That's straight from his mouth through yours to us. So Michael Bungay Stanier. Now, he starts off with this question, what's on your mind? Yeah. I would want to put forward, you can substitute anything into there. What have you been thinking about lately? What are you feeling right now? What's in your heart? What's going on? Yeah. But what's on your mind? It's got a bunch of social validation research that goes along with it. It's called Facebook. And I think that the English speaking community on Facebook is like 1 billion plus. So they, as I said earlier, they tried a different one and they went, no, that doesn't work. I like this question so much. I would love it to see it turned into just a single thing, because it goes WOYM, WOM. You know, you just say to people, WOM. And then his second question. So if we just to say WOM and then somebody starts responding, his next question is and what else? Or is there anything else? But and what else is AWE. Now we could get super succinct as questioners if we could play in that jargon space by going to somebody, whom, or, what's on your mind? And what else? And what else? Single syllables, getting out of their space so they can stay inside of their own mind. Anyway, you'd really want to set that up with some communication, with meta communication with somebody, because if you just go to them, whom, or, then, you know, all right. So anyway, what's on your mind and what else can surface things. If somebody has shared with you something they want to go further into, asking them, what's the real challenge for you here? That puts them both in a position of responsibility and the conversation in a position of what's really going on. Yeah? If someone was to bring up something, so this is a wrinkle inside of the box of crayons. If someone was to bring up something that's really exciting there for them, then you might ask them, what's the real opportunity for you here? We know that's two sides of the same coin. Well, what's the greatest opportunity for you here? Whatever the case may be. Yeah. Now, if you're going the opportunity one, that could make this next one redundant. But what do you want? It's such a good question. It's so anti-Buddhist, yet it's so right on the mark. You know, it doesn't transcend desire. It gets to the nub of desire. And very often that is what people are grappling with, is that I am consciousness caught in some kind of fixation on a desire. And when we can get clear about what we want, there's multiple forks we could go for from that point. We can either buy into the want, and this is where I'm deviating from box of crayons again. When I say buy into the want, we can support the desire and go with the desire, or we could get transpersonal and ask something like, who are you without this desire? And in which case, the person can, in a certain sense, detach themselves from the need that goes along with that want, and perhaps come back to it with a sense of less attachment. However, if somebody says what they want and it's a healthy space to keep going with them, to nurture them towards what they want, we could ask them, if you're saying yes to this, what are you saying no to? Or if you're inviting this in, what are you letting go of? For example, have any of you got any friends in your life? That friend might be yourself, but any friends in your life who may wish to have an intimate relationship? They don't have one now, but they'd like to have an intimate relationship with somebody. Can anyone think of anybody in their life at this time who has that circumstance? Any of your friends? Because if you do, what might happen for those people is, if they're saying yes to that, they might need to say no to buying into their fear of rejection. If they're saying yes towards going towards that, or if they're inviting that in, they may need to let go of holding themselves back from putting themselves out there. Yeah? It's very hard to go towards what we want when we're still holding on to anything which is keeping it away. And very often that is the case. If someone says that they want to have a better relationship with their finances, they might need to say no to being disorganized and not having a budget. You know, they might need to let go of their fear of confronting financial reality. You know, whatever the case may be. When somebody wants to focus on something, it likely means that it's time for them to let go of another focus or let go of another belief to create a space for that. The cup's already full. There's nowhere for this new desire and action. There's no space for it to come in, is the point there. Now, then we could ask them as well, is there anything that you'd like to do towards that? Are there any actions you'd like to take? And now you can hear we're getting very coachy by this stage of the conversation. And that's why I'm saying that there is certain thresholds inside a conversation such as this that we might pass through, where somebody goes, this does not sound like a normal conversation. It doesn't sound like an exploration. It sounds like it's a conversation with a goal. And very often that is not the case. And so either you can create meta contexts in your relationships of saying, hey, how do you feel about us having conversations, sometimes organically, in which we'll not only explore stuff, but explore what you want to do with it. I know I've been doing that for myself, and it's really been helping me to get on the front foot in terms of where I want to go and where I want to put my attention. And I'd love to bring that orientation into our relationship. At the same time as that, I don't want to push you anywhere. I want to be here for you in the way that works best for you. If you are up for it though, there's some questions that we could play with that could help you not only to explore what's going on, but also where you want to go in relation to that. If I didn't have that conversation, like I might sound long-winded on that stuff. My mentor in terms of one of my first teachers in communication is still my mentor today. I first learned with him about 12 years ago, Crucial Conversations methodology and the nonviolent communication methodology. He's been all the way up to, you know, Unilever CEOs and all that kind of stuff in terms of the facilitation and coaching that he does. He'll take however long it needs to be able to make sure that the context is clear so that there's not going to be a psychic destabilization that takes place thereafter. That's just me selling you guys on meta communication to the best of my ability. Take the time and you'll save time. Go slow to go fast. Yeah. So where we've come to, here's my final 4 questions for you to ask yourself in relation to this. What questions am I asking now? So just be clear with yourself. Pay attention to what questions you're habitually asking. Yes, yourself. But in our context today, what questions are you asking others and the people that matter most? What questions would you like to ask? Yeah. How can I create the context in which I can ask those questions? And if you're clear about that, these are the questions I want to ask of these people, and this is how I can create the context, then the last one is more of a closed question. When will you do it? And that's how we go from the space of endless personal development to life creation and real transformation, because we change structures by getting involved with the people who are in our lives and practicing things. So that's my content for us for today. I'm happy to be here with you guys for another period of time. And you know, if there is questions, observations, suggestions that people have for themselves, one another, feedback, whatever the case may be. But from this point, if you are leaving, please, you know, pop a little message in or unmute yourself and let us know that you're going. It always feels lovely to have some kind of final moment. Oh, there's the person gone, and we heard a word from you. What is the person's name that was mentioned? Can you write that into the messages there, please, James?
Sure, yeah.
I think I'm
on my phone. Hang on, let me see if I can find it. I'm on my phone, so it might be difficult.
Bungay.
Michael Bungay, Bungay.
Thank you.
Stanier, Stanier.
Yes.
And that's Box of Crayons. You'll find him if you go to Box of Crayons.
There's a book called The Coaching Habit. Brilliant book. And you can get it on Audible as well as on, yeah, I think that's it there.
Yeah.
Was it Bungay or Bungay?
Bungay.
Yeah, with a G rather than the J. You got it. You got it. Yeah. And The Coaching Habit is the book that I've read of his, which was instrumental to me when I was launching, you know, into full-time coaching a few years ago. When I read that book, I'd already had like a methodology in mind that was very much using somatic elements and meditative elements and so on. However, I was looking for something that would lead us from insight into action, something that would take us from going deep to going far, you know. And the strategic questioning sequence he has in there to move it from an insight into an action orientation, really elegant, and his explanations in relation to it really spot on. So give me some feedback, at least via the thermometer, before I come to you, James. Has this been stimulating for you today? This, and thermometer means like, yeah, good. That's why I'm here, is that I'm hoping that we're provoking your mind into interesting spaces in terms of what you're bringing to life. So yeah, I thank you for this time that we've shared. James, coming back to you.
Yeah, thank you. You touched earlier on NVC,
Yeah.
and I was wondering how many people on the call know about it. But what are your thoughts on the NVC sequence? Because there is a kind of sequence as well.
Yeah, I think one step missing, personally, and you know, if we were with an NVC master practitioner, they might be like, "Oh, you just don't get it." But you know, so there's the model is OFNR, OFNR, observation, when feeling, I felt, you know, or whatever the emotion is, I got frustrated, whatever it is. N for need, which you can also supplement as value, because I value, or because blah blah is important to me. The need language can sound a little weird sometimes, I find. And then the request. Now, the missing step that I think is there is after the F and after the feeling. And that is because I told myself. Rather than, because there can often be this thing of, let me give an example. So let me think of something that was recent. Oh, okay. So I'm sure Kaylin will forgive me for saying this one. It's just the most recent example, because I was upstairs before. Now, we got no back end kind of element set up at this stage for capturing people's details from all of these things that I'm doing. And therefore, Kaylin said to me, well, something along the, at least I'm remembering it this way. And she didn't mean it, I think, in this way, but she said, well, then there's no point, is there? If you don't have that back end sequence, there's no point. And if I was to respond to her using NVC, I would say, when you say there is no point to me running these webinars in this way, I feel frustrated, even angry, because I value connection. And I believe in the power of connection for it to generate its own energy. Can I make a request that you think about this more fully and see what you see as being the positives and the negatives in terms of the way that I'm going about it now? And then I might be more open to being able to hear that and not shut down to the one critique, something like that. However, if I was to redo that over, I could say, when you said that there's no point to me doing this, I felt frustrated because I'm telling myself you believe your statement, that there is no point. See, there's a slight wrinkle there, because Kaylin wouldn't have actually have believed that there was no point. And she could take that as being an attack on her of sorts. So there's just this one little element. I feel this because I was telling myself. It brings in that there is a thought emotion link rather than an occurrence emotion link. There's an occurrence thought emotion link. Does that make sense, James?
I think it does, because without that, you're missing an internal
yes
that you're not articulating to the person you're sharing with.
Yes. So it's like, if, say for example, like I can come back to the same one and I could say, when you said that, I felt angry because I have a need for respect. Can you please talk to me like da-da-da? And she might be like, I was respecting you. I was respecting you through my robust energy by talking to you straight. You know, so instead, when you said that, I felt frustrated because I was telling myself you weren't respecting me. Yeah. And I really value respect. Would you be able to say that again and blah, blah, blah? Does that make sense?
It does.
It's just it's a slight disentanglement that I think can really make a big difference for a lot of people in relation to NVC. Bringing the thinking that gives rise to the feeling into the equation at step 3, making it a 5-step sequence.
The other aspect of that, Cairo, is that respect is a very loaded word. It means different things to different people.
You know, I love talking about that word. That's why I like going to etymology. I'm like, well, I've got the oldest meaning.
Back to the secret sauce.
Back to the secret sauce, you got it. Anything else that anybody else would like to bring up inside of the space? Questions, observations, feedback?
I'd just like to say thank you, because it refreshed my memory with a lot of stuff we've done before and spoken about. And yeah, it's got me excited again to go ask these 3 people at a minimum these questions. And especially now, like cool challenge, you know, to do for myself is get these people on Zoom or on the phone and just get them talking about themselves. And what a great time to be remembering, you know, parts of your life and good parts of your life. So thanks, Cara. Great webinar again.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you. I love seeing you, Megan. It's just you mean the world to me. I'm so happy to have you here today. Thank you. So with that, I invite everybody just to unmute yourself if you feel to. If there is anybody in Facebook land right now, then much love to you guys as well. Wishing you well. As I say to you, the people who have been here, you've heard me say this, you know, over and over again, but we've got one choice, and that's where to spend our time, what to do with our time. And again, thank you so much for bringing your conscious attention into this space with each other. It's an absolute privilege and honor for me. So thank you all so very much.
Likewise, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, Cara.
Thank you. Oh, James, I'm done with quarantine as of tomorrow afternoon, so I can come over and visit you, I think, thereafter.
Yay! Great. Thank you. I look forward to that.
Okay.
Bye.
Much love, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.